And I'm joined now from New York by Professor and author Adam Alter. He's the author of Irresistible, the book examining our growing addiction to technology. Katina Michael is here with me in the studio. She's Professor at the School of Computing and Information Technology at the University of Wollongong, specialising also in online addiction. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Adam, how addicted are we to technology?
Well, you heard a bit about it earlier on. We are greatly addicted. There's a massive study that was run in 2011, so that's now some years ago, showing that about 41% of the adult population had some form of behavioural addiction. And the suggestion is that now that's probably up around 50%.
And Katina, is there a particular demographic or sex that's more vulnerable than another?
I think our studies have shown that even anyone over 14 and under 55 are as prone to, for instance, smartphone addiction. So we're all just copying each other, and it looks like a normalised behaviour. And given our parents are using more, children are using more, and they're just copying and mimicking.
What constitutes addictive technology, Adam, assuming it doesn't include making calls on your phone?
No, that's right. Most of what goes on screens. So it's the screen component of the phone that's so difficult for us to resist. And that's because screens can deliver all sorts of interesting rewards to us that draw us in and that keep us engaged over time. So things like games, email, social media, texting is a big one as well. So those are just some of them. There's also shopping, fitness devices. It's a pretty big range of behaviours.
And what do you both think are the long-term consequences, negative clearly, of this addictive behaviour? I mean, drug addiction and gambling addictions, we know what those obvious consequences and impacts are. Katina, what is the problem with being on our phone so much?
I think it's a loss of productivity, it's a loss of time in relationships, our families, our friends. It's this loss of the physical space where we had integrity and authenticity when we looked at each other's eyes and said, "Hi, how are you feeling today?" It's also a loss of dignity, I think, in some ways. People are seeking instant gratification online, and when they don't get reactions and likes, they feel depressed and down. And I think we're going to see a higher incidence of mental illness, types of obsessive-compulsive disorders, but really unnamed disorders as such until now.
Adam, you're in fact a psychology professor. Is that gelling with you?
Yeah, absolutely. We think of 4 different kinds of effects. Financial, where people spend a lot of money on experiences that they can't resist. Social, where their social lives decline. Physical, where, for example, they're glued to the couch, or even over-exercise if they're addicted to smartwatches. And psychological as well. So, for example, our boredom threshold has declined to the point where you'll get in an elevator for 5 seconds, take out your phone. Boredom is very important for productivity, for creativity and new ideas. And if you never allow yourself to be bored, you'll never have those ideas.
Oh, I'll remember that when I'm admonishing my children. How do you determine whether someone is actually addicted, Katina?
So there are a range of scales that people use. For instance, people call something as internet addiction a broad addiction scale, video game addiction, which has come up in the diagnostic statistical manual for mental disorders in the US. In other cases, we look at specific apps, for example, Facebook addiction, and we've got scales for this, and technology-specific addictions like, are you addicted to your smartphone? But increasingly, we're even seeing things like cybersexual activity online being diagnosed as an addiction specific to an activity.
Adam, is there a certain amount of hours? I mean, whether you take it to bed with you or look at it the first thing in the morning, I mean, how do you diagnose a tech addiction?
I think to a large extent it's subjective. I think you can ask yourself if you have a problem, and you'll know this. It's one of the areas where people have a pretty good intuition. They feel that their lives are being encroached upon by devices, their social lives, maybe their relationships with their loved ones and friends. They're not experiencing nature, they're not exercising, things like that. There are scales which I think are very useful from a diagnostic perspective, but a lot of what we can answer is really just in asking ourselves, do you feel that the device is taking over your life in some way?
Adam, you've written about a private school in San Francisco that I found fascinating, where they use no technology in the school, and curiously 75% of the parents work in the tech sector.
Yeah, this was fascinating to me. When you talk to the tech titans in the US and actually around the world, you would expect them to be the biggest pushers of technology in the home. You'd think that their children would be the biggest users of tech. But what you actually find is the reverse, that a lot of these tech titans refuse to let their kids near technology. So they'll send them to schools that don't involve technology or don't introduce tech until later on. And a lot of them, including Steve Jobs in 2010 in an interview, say things like, you should use this device, but we don't allow it in our home and we won't let our kids near it. And he was talking about the iPad.
And these are people that ascribe to the idea that they do no evil.
Exactly.
What do you think about that, Katina? What does that tell you?
I think it's extremely hypocritical and double standards, really. I think our children are struggling with literacy all over the world, and we're just placing iPads in front of them as if that's going to solve the problem, giving them even more access to information instead of the textbooks that we used to once hold on our backs in our school bags. I think we need to recheck our strategies worldwide. The laptop's not going to make you smarter and more intelligent. I think the companies that Adam was talking about need to recheck their ethics, and I think our children need to stop being sold the wrong story about what's going to make their future brighter. We have a lot to answer for as academics.
What's the advice, Katina, about scaling down your usage? Are there any tips?
Yes. My first and foremost is always the Pavlovian cue, which is an audio or visual notification that you might get, the ting and the ping on your phone, or that little notification on the bottom right of your screen. How do you eradicate this? Simply turn off the notifications. I'd also say, think about replacing the activities that you have done online with offline activities, whether it's going for physical exercise, joining a community group, or just getting a job. Or just speaking with your family and making real food instead of playing a game about making food. And a lot of it has to do with getting back to the physical world, away from the virtual world. Leave that phone behind if you don't need it. I just have one between 5 people instead of 5 phones where you're all gathered around the table just looking at your Twitter settings and your Twitter notifications every time you hear them beep.
And play Scrabble with a person in real life.
In real life, yes.
Adam, any tips?
Yeah, I agree with all of those that Katina suggested. I would also say that it's important to start small, I think, with any of these sorts of interventions and changes in your life. So one thing you could do is say, I have dinner every day, whether it's with other people or alone or in the home or in a restaurant, no matter where it is, I will not use my phone when I'm at the dinner table. It's doable. We can all manage that. And what's interesting is in the beginning you get fear of missing out. You have FOMO. You have a sort of withdrawal that you might have from any addictive experience. But in time, people feel really good about that. They start to feel that that experience is richer, more colourful, more interesting. And what I've seen is that when I work with people who do this, it expands. They decide themselves, because it feels good, that they're going to do the same thing, say, on the weekend, maybe between dinner and bedtime. And they all basically universally suggest that they feel better off for having done that.
Adam Alter, thank you for your time, and I have a confession to make that I keep my phone at the desk on Lateline while I'm on air. Katina was a witness to it. I realised just how hypocritical I was being just before we came on for this segment. So Katina Michael, Adam Alter, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.